gaming guilds, and the play-to-earn ecosystem.
So gaming guilds and play to earn, something, two things that are kind of like synonymous to each other, I guess. Guilds are born because of play to earn came about, and then startups like AAG, 𝐒𝐭𝐨𝐬𝐬, and many other guilds, right? Came out of that. So something cool. So why don't we start with making some introduction? Start with.
I guess good afternoon. I guess last session for the day, so hopefully you can keep the energy up. My name is Cholo. I co-founded PIF Nation. We started our life as a gaming guild, but as with any other play-to-earn gaming guild, we felt the need to pivot because, and we'll talk about it more in a panel. But the previous play-to-earn model we felt was broken. But what we figured out was that gamers still want to engage in new games, still want to engage in game discovery, but there's also a core need of game. They want to have terminal value for their time spent gaming. So basically what we pivoted into is kind of like a platform that helps games with publishing. So we help games with user acquisition and retention. Here's 𝐒𝐭𝐨𝐬𝐬, focusing on Philippines, Indonesia, and we recently announced expansion into Vietnam. And really where we see that value is because there's away from the AAA game studios, there's a long tail of game developers that don't have the distribution rails in the discarded world, but would also benefit a lot from this very mobile first and also very native crypto gamers that will really help their games scale up and do really well. So that's us.
Cool.
So my name is Ash Mandhyan. I'm from MetaverseGo. We started MetaverseGo a year ago, towards the mid to latter part where Axie was such a hype in the Philippines, coming from both an e-commerce and a social platform background. We thought that there's a chance for connecting two different groups that have to meet. So like as Cholo mentioned, right there, it needs to be a discovery rail. Part of our platform has that, but our main core value is really onboarding the user and getting them into Web3. We think that there are billions of users that are curious, but there's so much friction today. There's so much news, and there's, in terms of validating that, and the experience challenge is a little bit too high. So what we've done is decided to reduce that friction. We've simplified onboarding into Web3. We've simplified game discovery. And our intent is really to help both users and games kind of have that match and connect.
Cool. So, so let's get this fun started. So, I guess my first question, something for every guild, since, guilds are born out of play to earn. Do you think play to earn is dead? Why and why not? Ash?
Me? So I don't think that the main concept or thesis is dead. The idea that I spend time, I gain value, and there is an opportunity to earn within a game, that is fundamentally stable. However, what needs evolution, what needs further studying, what's currently being worked on, is the idea of how do I balance that out? What is the right amount of reward? And how do I reward the right community? It's not just anyone enters the game, they get rewarded. But how do I reward the person that puts in effort, right? So a lot of games have been working towards this. I think Axie stumbled upon this growth channel, this discovery, but the whole economics of it was not fully analyzed. It was very early on, and I think up until today, you're seeing maybe AAA studios starting to look into this, having better understanding of how to balance both interest, community maintenance, and actually growing that with a component of actually rewarding and ownership for that space.
Okay. So you mentioned, Ash, about these economic models. Like, what sort of economic model do you think kind of solves that sustainability? I mean, in your point of view.
Well, I think the fact that we're utilizing the term economic models. It's very similar. It's as delicate as how countries are analyzing things, right? There should be a community or a segment of that community that's willing to generate value, but there is an equal community that will create that demand. Otherwise, you'll just have one side of the balance where there's supply for players, there's supply for, but not sufficient demand of people wanting to buy. So that trade balance has to exist. So having the right game, having the right components of members of that community, people that are willing to work, people that are willing to purchase that work, and what that will pay out. Cholo?
I agree with what everything Ash said, but I guess the only thing that I would add to that is, as I always say, crypto and blockchain does not create new behaviors. So if you look at play to earn has been in existence since Diablo 2, since World of Warcraft. People have always been kind of farming things to create value, but to Ash's point, there needs to be a community that actually wants to buy the exit product, right? So even in World of Warcraft, Diablo 2, Diablo 3, now Diablo 4, there's always that next buyer that actually values what you've grinded from your time and is willing to pay for that. And the reason that happens is because these games have invested millions and billions of dollars in developing the IP that actually people want to keep coming back and playing the game. What we saw in the initial stages of play to earn is that they were trying to use token incentives to create user acquisition, which at some point it always falls short, because unless you're creating a really compelling user experience that people want to keep coming back and spending money, then at some point you're just going to run out of steam, because either you're going to run out of money, run out of tokens to print, and your gamers that bought at the peak will have a terrible user experience because everything they bought at $90 is now worth $1. And I think that's where we're excited personally from a next generation of Web3 games, because they're going to learn from that. I think the first iteration of Play to Earn showed proof of concept that if you put some stuff on a blockchain and there's a kind of like an economic model for players to earn from their time spent gaming, they will engage in that. Now, the challenge is to both Web 2 and Web 3 is how do you create sustainable business models off of that and not just fund your user acquisition with insane token incentives and high inflation.
Okay. So just out of curiosity, I was just thinking of, just the word, play to earn it in and of itself. So how do you, just out of curiosity, what do you think about, how does one really play to earn in your point of view?
I think just because of in the environment we're in, I personally think that games fundamentally are PvP or PvE. And games, for them to be having a sustainable business model, it has to be zero-sum game. So if you're winning, someone's losing. That's fundamentally why people play games, because gamers are big consumers of flex culture. The more we can flex on someone because we've been winning, or the more we can flex because we've been earning more than someone else, that is important to gamers. And I think that's where we're headed around. How do you enable these economies where there's risk to playing, and it's not just free money because, okay, I spent 2 hours every day playing 𝐒𝐿, I'll get $1,000 a month. I think that's unsustainable because that money has to come from somewhere. But you can either fund it as a PvE model where like 𝐒𝐿 was coming from a company, or you can fund it PvP. We've seen games like Shrapnel where there's risk of loss. You go into a ranked match, you wager your NFTs. If you lose, then you lose that NFT. So it's really putting skin in the game, put your money where your mouth is. Are you a really good gamer? Then put your best skin up for grabs. If you're bad, then don't play a ranked match. And that's been the competitive nature of really good IPs, because there's no risk-free, whether it's like elo loss, whether it's like losing rank, there's no risk-free gaming experience.
Right.
You have to put something on the line as a gamer, and I think that's where we're gonna see a lot of these innovations around enabling that with blockchain infrastructure, not necessarily just Ponzonomics.
Ash, what do you think of that?
Completely agree with what Cholo says. There has to be some form of balance. I think when you think of gaming, the initial version, as he pointed out, was a marketing stunt, right? It's an acquisition cost. To sustain it, there has to be times when you win, times when you lose, and you get paid when you win. You get to earn, but there are times that you lose. And I think even for most games, right, there's an economy and there's a community. If there's a community, there's more incentives for you to join. You're not joining, you shouldn't just be joining simply because you want to earn that $1,000 at the end of the week. You're joining because you want to play with your friends. Growing up, I probably was one of the suckiest StarCraft players, but all my friends played StarCraft, so I'll join along. I'll pay the fee, I'll join the competition, I'll lose, but I enjoyed it. The player who won got that pot money, but I didn't feel bad. There's that balance, and I got a trade-off. I got the value from that experience. So I think that concept has to exist as the economy grows, as the variations of games grow, and interoperability grows. I think the intent is, how does it stay balanced? Will there be sufficient buyers for the value that's being created? And are there sufficient losers, or happy losers, I'd say, to sustain that funds that the play-to-earn community gets?
Cool. Since you guys touched upon the concept of, some people winning, some people losing, playing games, since, we're here, right? The one thing that comes to my mind is, the concept of RTP, return to player. So that's a thing in gambling, usually 95% or whatever percentage. So talking about, with that thing in mind, right, with the thinking of sustainability and circular economy for play to earn, do you think there's some sort of intersection between gambling and maybe play to earn moving forward in the future, do you think?
I think there's a great intersection because if you even look at traditional sports and gambling, the sports book the community is massive, right? The amount of gambling that happens around even stuff like, is player X going to make 2 free throws this quarter, or he's going to make 6? There's huge, very granular things you can bet on. If you roll something out for people to bet on, they'll just bet on it. And I think where blockchain technology really enables that is in esports, because if you can then bet on micro outcomes within games, that's a huge industry. If you can bet on per round in CS:GO, for example, and it's judged by a blockchain, not the big competitions, because that already happens, but micro competitions, your community league, your MLBB league within your community, if you allow people to wager on that, that's amazing, and that's going to unlock a lot of, I would say, transaction volume. Now, whether that's done in a very sustainable and socially responsible way, I guess it's really up to the industry to determine that.
Ash, any thoughts on that?
I agree that there's an overlap. I think fundamentally Web3 crypto traders, as an audience, you have to have a sense of risk appetite. The fact that you're entering into a very nascent space. And I think that overlap exists throughout life. So it's a matter of appetite. You choose which game you like,
Right.
the level of bet you put in, and your trust in your luck or your skill. And that's generally what it is. It's either a mix of both luck and skill
Right.
in any game.
Yeah, even, if you think about it, just living in general, there is some sort of luck that exists with it.
I mean, the only thing I can add to that is even now within the Binances and the Coinbases, eToro, there's a thing called trade following, right? So if you're a really good trader, you get paid amount on trade follow, right? Imagine if you could replicate that through NFTs and through blockchain gaming, where you can bet follow someone that's just really good at betting on Dota 2 outcomes. You would get the best bettors would just get so much follow trades on the back of that. And I think that's just a great design space that is really that intersection of gamers and casino operators, right?
Cool. Yeah, with that in mind and all these evolution and changes in the industry, how do you think this impacts the business model of guilds in general? Because to start with, way back 2021, right? The guilds were born out of, we want to buy X amount of NFTs and get other people to play it and commission around it. So, do you think, moving forward, are guilds even still necessary? And if they are, what role do you think guilds play?
I think in essence, they're so I think they bring two things to the table. One, there's a sense of community at the grassroots level. Think of different communities, different towns, and the guild is basically you finding that group of friends with the same game interest entering that space. The second thing it does, and think of it from a sports angle, right? You think of, in the Philippines, there's this thing called barangay games, right? And you kind of climb up from that guild. You get known in a single guild. You get recruited, join a different guild, until you eventually get to a stage of professional gaming, right? But what the guild does is it helps nurture, it helps identify, and it grows that space. So that community, you'll have, before you even really get good at the game, there's somebody in your town, in your neighborhood, or in that group that you looked up to. You thought that, hey, this person plays well. Then maybe I could play as good. Maybe I could play better. Maybe I could move on.
100%. I completely agree with that. I think what we've learned from crypto is a very good way to align objectives and organize people through token incentives. I really look at the very early days of competitive esports, right? When you would go to the arcade and you would challenge the people on Street Fighter 2, like, hey, I'm better than you. And then the really good players start to build that reputation. Now, blockchain technology allows people within guilds, really good esports players, to carry that identity with them. That doesn't have to be just your neighborhood really good CSGO player. Now you're like on-chain verifiable that you are a really good CSGO player. And that enables democratization of players, that they can essentially be discovered by teams out of the US, out of North America. We've seen examples of really good Dota 2 players being poached to go to play in the North America scene. And that's just going to accelerate with blockchain technology as more and more of players' identities and skills get brought on chain. Then you can really level the playing field, that you can be a good gamer anywhere. And you don't have to just be a good gamer in Indonesia. You can be a good gamer globally if your stats speak for themselves.
Okay, so previously, on the previous generation, games, startups, and different companies usually gravitate towards guilds because of their user base, right? Because they say, okay, you have X thousand amount of scholars that can play this game and test it for you, or spend that much. So now that concept is pretty much, I guess, outdated, right? So with this accumulation of users now as a guild, how do you see that evolving moving forward with all this development that you see going forward, with people taking risks more, or being okay with spending money to make money, pretty much, or being okay to lose? How do you think guilds then communicate that role, or I guess play the part in ushering in new users with their communities?
So we think about it exactly the same way. Where we see guilds and gaming communities perform a very necessary role in the community, or from a game developer standpoint, is what we found with our kind of like user acquisition model. Guilds have much better conversion. Their players tend to be very aligned with their own vision. Whereas, say, if you have like a KOL with like millions of followers, I do question whether 90% of those followers align with them, or is it just a very wide net and conversion is very, very tricky. So that's what we do. We when we help games publish, we provide attribution. Like, these communities give you the best outcomes. So when you want to retarget them or do another game launch, these are the communities that will have the highest leverage on conversion. What we found is that gaming communities, whether it's guilds, esports teams, there's a much stronger alignment around their fan base and what they do. So if we can identify kind of like a group of guilds that are very focused on first-person shooter games, then we can advise games and developers to, hey, push your activation through these communities rather than these, because we've seen that at least for FPS they convert much higher and they retain much longer, and that's where I would say guilds. I guess we've all operated guilds ourselves. Past a certain point, the community just breaks down. There's a limit to how many people you can manage and keep that community cohesive. And where we see that happening is that they just have to be an aggregator of communities of some sorts.
That's an interesting one. Ash?
Yeah. So I think 2 points that Cholo shared that I could build on is one, from the concept of value or user acquisition value, working with guilds, the insight that they could provide is quite different from going to a random individual, because they know sort of a congregated point of view, right? They share a point of view that they know this congregation, this team. Think of a church and congregation. I think they share a belief system. They share an interest that a game can build for. So it's a community that will respond to adjustments you build out. The second thing that's on that layer is within that community, there is competition, right? So the value that is outside the game, but is provided by the community, is the idea that I go in here, there is somebody stimulating an audience to not just play one time, but to keep coming back, to keep playing, because they want to be that other friend within that community. So that existence of that community is what it gives as a value. The lifetime value of your user for your game is managed not purely by the game, but by the community that's supporting the game as well.
Awesome. So let's say, hypothetically, let's say somebody wants to create a guild right now. What do you think, what sort of business model do you think can they operate realistically on? Like right now or moving forward sometime, maybe 2 or 3 years?
I go back to my earlier comment that crypto, blockchain, these technologies is a really good way of organizing people, disparate groups of people, maybe different countries, different places, around a common goal. And also I would counterbalance that with the barrier to entry for someone spinning up a guild is very low. So if you're a guild and you're not doing well by your community, they will just leave, because we saw it in the very early stages of 𝐒𝐿𝐴𝐶, that people were like multi-accounting through different guilds because they were just looking for the most rewarding avenue, right? And reward can take different forms. It could be monetary rewards. That was the early stage play to earn. But it could also be reward of opportunity. Like, is this guild giving you a better path to where you want to be? And that's where you see these differentiations start to come out. But ultimately, down to the nub of it is, as a guild, you have to be very clear about your value proposition, both to your community, but also the brands that you want to bring on board for that guild, whether it's user acquisition, whether it's content creation, whether it's like competitive esports. There's going to crop up multiple ways that the guilds can go after it. But you have to be very clear. You can't just keep chasing the next shiny thing, because, as I said, it's very low barrier to entry to spin up a guild. And if you have no strong IP or strong reason for existing, then the players will just leave.
Cool. So community, the power of community is pretty much what the guilds. That's, I guess, what we could say would be the moat, right, of the business, and having that engagement that not any influencer or creator can just have. So I guess that's it, guys. I hope you guys had fun in our panel. Thank you, Cholo and Ash.
Now we can go happy hour.
Thank you.